Hi there Waltineers, I'm Jack and this is DSNY Newscast, and last weekend was Destination D23 at Walt Disney World, and I was actually fortunate to be able to attend Destination D23 this year as media, and it was a big deal for me because I've never been to a D23 event before, as I'm always covering it here remotely from the studio. And at Destination D23 this year they made some news which I'm very excited about, and it's probably some news you've already heard about, but I want to dive into it in greater depth in this video today beyond the headline that you've already heard. And that's the news that Walt Disney's Carousel of Progress at the Magic Kingdom is going to be getting a major update to that attraction. And as part of that update, we're going to be seeing Walt Disney in Carousel of Progress in animatronic form. And the reason why I'm so excited about this news in particular is because if you've been watching this channel for quite some time, you know, going back many years, all the way back to July of 2018 actually, I did a video titled The Argument for a Walt Disney Animatronic at Disney World, and in that video I said that I felt that the time was right to have a Walt Disney animatronic within the parks, and if it was to go anywhere, I felt that the perfect location would be the Carousel of Progress. And so, as you can imagine, to be there in attendance when this actually got announced, it was a surreal experience to say the least. And it's one which I didn't think was going to happen, because last year at D23 we got the announcement of a audio animatronic figure of Walt Disney coming to Disneyland, and I thought, great, we're getting a Walt Disney animatronic at long last, and Disneyland's also a great location for that Walt Disney animatronic. And then back in July, when I was able to see this Walt Disney animatronic in person for myself, I said in my review at the time that if ever they were to bring a Walt Disney animatronic to Walt Disney World, again, I felt that the perfect location was for Carousel of Progress. And clearly, Walt Disney Imagineering were thinking the same way here, and they were 3 steps ahead of me on this because they already had this project ready to go. So it's just fantastic to see this come to fruition at long last, and it really is a dream come true for you and me. Anyway, with all of that being said, let's now dive into this in greater depth. As we can see in the artwork, that this is going to be very different from the A Magical Life setup that they've got in Disneyland. As with Walt Disney A Magical Life, that is Walt Disney depicted as he was in 1963, and they were using the 1963 CBC interview that you can see on the screen right now as a reference point for what Walt Disney was going to look like in A Magical Life. It was that version of Walt Disney from 1963 in that video there. But as we can see in this new piece of artwork for Carousel of Progress, this is going to be Walt Disney from 1964 in the wonderful world of Disney in an episode called Disneyland Goes to the World's Fair. And it aired in May of 1964, and Walt Disney is going to be appearing in that same classic blue cardigan where he was talking about great moments with Mr. Lincoln and It's a Small World, Ford Magic Skyway, and of course Walt Disney's Carousel of Progress in that special Wonderful World of Disney episode. And if you look in the background of the artwork, you can see references to those projects. There's artwork and a bust of Lincoln for Great Moments of Mr. Lincoln in the background. There's the It's a Small World Tower of the Four Winds that was featured at the 1964 World's Fair. There's a Tiki Room bird, a Tomorrowland rocket, which is probably hinting at Disneyland's Tomorrowland revamp that happened in the 1960s. And also, most importantly here for Walt Disney World fans, there's the kind of napkin sketch of Epcot that Walt drew, and then also the Florida Project Epcot artwork that we can see here on the artist's desk. And this is going to be within the pre-show of Carousel of Progress. So you know that beginning scene where the curtain lifts up and you see the Carousel of Progress logo and there's a little bit of a spiel there at the beginning. And from what I understand, this is going to be in that location as a pre-show introduction to Walt Disney's Carousel of Progress. As after all, who better to introduce the Carousel of Progress than Walt Disney himself, as his name is in the attraction. So it makes perfect sense. And then the next thing we're going to discuss is audio, as in terms of A Magical Life, Imagineering used archival recordings of Walt Disney and kind of spliced together different clips to kind of create a speech of around 2 minutes long that was encompassing different aspects of Walt's life and talking about his philosophy for the company and how he felt about the legacy of the Disney company and things like that. But with this one, most likely I think that they might be cleaning up the audio from that 1964 episode of The Wonderful World of Disney and maybe using an entire dialogue of Walt speaking from that episode, or maybe they'll be splicing together different clips from that same episode. But because they will all be the same episode, I think that the audio will blend together much better, because when it came to A Magical Life, they had to use audio recordings from various different interviews with different audio recording equipment there that made for a different sound of different quality. So with this, it should sound a lot better and more consistent in terms of Walt's voice, and he'll obviously be speaking in his own words yet again. Then you've also got to think about, the beginning pre-show scene, it kicks off the whole attraction with the song Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow. It begins playing. And so you've actually got Walt Disney singing Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow in a segment that he filmed with the Sherman Brothers at the piano. And so with special audio post-production now, I wonder if Imagineering will be able to single out and isolate Walt's voice singing Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow to begin the actual attraction. And so if they were able to do that, I would consider that to be the icing on the cake here for Walt Disney within Carousel of Progress here. And then in terms of the rest of the attraction, it was confirmed on stage that John, Sarah and the rest of the family, Patricia or James, as they're known in the attraction, but they will be remaining within Carousel of Progress. The Progress family, as I like to call them, will be remaining within Carousel of Progress. It'll be the same exact family that we'll see within Carousel of Progress. And all that we know for certain is that the finale scene is going to be updated for Carousel of Progress. That's what they've stated in Disney Parks blog. So the other three scenes, which are obviously the turn of the century scene, the first one in the early 1900s, the roaring 20s of the 1920s, and then the fabulous 40s scene in the 1940s, will supposedly remain in place. But I'm fully expecting that the props within the actual scenes themselves, the set pieces, the set dressing, all of that stuff will most likely be refurbished, so therefore it looks brand new again, and likely the audio animatronic figures throughout all of these scenes will be getting new internal components and a full refurbishment, very similar to what we saw with the new life that Imagineering put into the Country Bear Jamboree last year, and now those figures work brilliantly within that attraction. So it's just great to see Imagineering investing in such a legacy attraction such as Carousel of Progress, and that it's going to live on for many years from now. But we also have to talk about the finale scene, because we don't know if Disney are going to set this finale scene in the future, 10, 20, 30 years in the future, maybe in the 2050s, or are they going to set it in the present of modern technology of today, which is what they did in the 1964 New York World's Fair version of Carousel of Progress, where they showed the latest and greatest General Electric technology at that time. And if they were to do that for today, it would probably make it easier for Imagineering to showcase current technology than make wild guesses for future technology, because you have to really think far off into the future to be able to fully future-proof this scene in the attraction. And because they're going to be making large-scale changes to the finale scene, they're going to most likely have a new script for the finale scene, and they'll need new audio for that finale scene as well. And the thing to note here is that John, the main character for the attraction, was voiced by Gene Shepherd in the 1994 version, and Gene Shepherd sadly died in 1999. And so to be able to seamlessly blend the voices of all of the characters, to have it be a perfect audio match to the rest of the scenes, I think they're probably going to have to re-record all the audio for the characters in the other scenes as well, which means that there might be a possibility that they might make small script changes to the other scenes as well. Something to keep an eye on. We don't have that confirmed. It's just my own speculation based upon the fact that many of the voice actors for these characters are either no longer with us, or they're much older and their voices most likely won't sound the same scene to scene, so they can't use them again. So it's an important thing to note here, and it might give us a direction for the rest of the scenes as well. And so if they were to make changes to the other parts of the attraction, and they are going to be recording new audio, I personally would like to see Imagineering go one step further. I feel like it might be better to update it, so therefore you've got 1900s, turn of the century. That scene stays exactly the same as it is. It's also kind of the most iconic scene in the attraction. That needs to remain as it is. But then Scene 2, it's the 1920s, and the technology they're talking about there is obviously flight and the motion picture with Al Jolson in the jazz singer. Now, I feel like they need to update these scenes to better represent the technological advancements throughout the years leading up to present day. And so personally, I would like to see them update the 1920s to the 1960s, as you could do the space race and talk about, have Jimmy sat in front of a TV as the moon landing's happening and have John talk about the space race and all the modern technology in the 1960s there. And then the next scene, which would have been the 1940s, I feel like that should be probably the 1990s, and you could have John talking about the World Wide Web and this thing's never going to take off, that kind of thing. And it would be a way to kind of show the technological advancements over the past 125 years, that this attraction should be spanning. And so in the first scene, you've got the turn of the century, snap-on electric lights, the dawn of electricity. Second scene then would be 1960s and the space race and, humankind making it into space exploration. Then you got the third scene being the dawn of the World Wide Web and the internet connected age. And then you got the final scene, which would be present day. And I feel like that would make it much better for Carousel of Progress. But we'll see what happens. That's just my own personal armchair imagining of what I would do with the attraction. I'd love to know what you would think would work better in those scenes for Carousel of Progress down below in the comments section. Then in terms of the potential time frame for this, now no date has been given in terms of when Carousel of Progress is going to be closing at Walt Disney World. It's not been listed on the refurbishment calendar yet as of recording this video for 2025. But I reckon that the closure is going to come likely in 2026. And then if I was to guess at a reopening time period, depending on how extensive this refurbishment is going to be and how many issues they run into along the way in this refurbishment, I think that they might be aiming for a reopening in 2027. And the reason for that is because it would be the 60th anniversary of this attraction's debut in Disneyland, in a Disney park. And back when they did the 1994 version, that was a 30-year anniversary of the attraction debuting at the 1964 World's Fair when it reopened in 1994. So to have it open in 2027, they could make a whole celebration about it being the 60th anniversary of this classic attraction within the Magic Kingdom. And so I feel like 2027 is a pretty safe guess for when this could open. But considering that Disney is making the fantastic decision to keep Carousel of Progress around and invest in it in a huge way, we've also got to talk about the wider implications that this has on Tomorrowland, as in many ways, Carousel of Progress and Space Mountain are the heart and soul of Tomorrowland at the Magic Kingdom. And so I want to talk about Space Mountain, as Space Mountain opened in 1975, and it's 50 years old this year. And typically, roller coasters have a lifespan of around 40 to 45 years before they're fully retracked. And as we've seen with Big Thunder Mountain, that opened in 1980, and it's now 45 years, and they're doing a full retracking of Big Thunder Mountain Railroad at Magic Kingdom, and they're replacing the track entirely. And so when Big Thunder Mountain opens next year, I think that if they're investing in Carousel of Progress, we might also get an announcement they're going to do a big update to Space Mountain as well at some point. And there have been extensive refurbishments in the past to Space Mountain. Back in 2009, it underwent a refurbishment that saw many segments of the track taken out, replaced and welded into place for the rest of the coaster. And there's been rumours swirling on the forums for quite a few years now about Space Mountain receiving a retrack. So with Big Thunder Mountain Railroad reopening next year, could it be that Space Mountain goes down for an extensive refurbishment next year as well? As Big Thunder Mountain reopens, you gain the capacity back with Big Thunder Mountain, and then you lose the capacity with Space Mountain in Tomorrowland. And I feel like that would be a great way of opening, Carousel of Progress maybe in 2027, and then I think it would take maybe a little bit longer to do Space Mountain, probably a 2-year refurbishment, and open that in 2028. And this is all just educated guesswork based upon what we've seen previously. As Space Mountain over at Disneyland, it had a full track replacement, and it took 2 years back then, and that was from 2003 to 2005. And the reason why it took so long is because Space Mountain is such a uniquely shaped building, and so to change out the track, it is like assembling traveling a ship inside a bottle. So it is very difficult to retrack the entirety of Space Mountain, but I think, you know, that is probably going to be in the cards in the next couple of years as well. That's just a speculation on my part there. Now, we've also seen other parts of Tomorrowland receive, you know, a lot of TLC in the past couple of years. We saw People Mover back in 2020, 2021, 2022 receive various refurbishments to the magnetic linear induction motors around the over 1 mile of People Mover track to keep it in good operation. And also we saw updates to the show scenes and the narration with ORAC 5 debuting in 2022. So People Mover got some love from Disney with that addition there, so that's staying around. And then the Astro Orbiter this year was fully dismantled and refurbished. And then Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin is down for an extensive refurbishment opening next year with new freestanding blasters on each one of the ride vehicles and also digital interactive targets, replacing the static targets within that attraction. So that's a huge update to Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin there as well. But then we need to talk about the remaining Tomorrowland attractions. And I'm talking Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor, Stitch's Great Escape, or the former location of Stitch's Great Escape, and Tomorrowland Speedway. Those are the 3 remaining attractions within Tomorrowland. Now, Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor is what I want to hone in and talk about, because with Monstropolis being built over at Hollywood Studios, they've got the former Muppet Vision 3D theatre over there that's going to be transformed into a new Monsters Inc. show, with the outside of the theatre being referred to as the Glob, which is a punny kind of play on the Globe Theatre for Shakespeare in London. And Parks Blog have confirmed it is a new show. So I'm saying it's unlikely that we'll see Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor ported on over to Monstropolis over there. So we're either going to have Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor remain in place in Tomorrowland and get a new Monsters Inc. show over at Hollywood Studios, or I think it's more possible that we'll see Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor sunsetted and, you know, close when they open up Monstropolis at Hollywood Studios to keep all of the Monsters Inc. attractions in one place over there. Now, obviously, they didn't do that with Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin when they opened at Toy Story Land, so it's possible that they might keep Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor in place as well for a couple of years and then eventually replace it. But I reckon we might see the end of Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor fairly soon, because when people talking about, you know, the latest Monsters Inc. show at Walt Disney World, from a pure marketing perspective, you don't want people to confuse it with Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor. And so that's the reason why I'm leaning towards Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor, you know, going away in the next couple of years. And then we've got Stitch's Great Escape. Now, in 2020, it had a permit file for the demolition of the interior of this attraction, and obviously it's been shut since 2018 and hasn't reopened since then, but it remains an extremely strong IP, Lilo and Stitch does. You know, the live action remake that came out this year made over $1 billion at the worldwide box office. So clearly Stitch is a very popular IP, and Stitch is a mainstay within Tomorrowland. So the fact that they've partially demolished this theatre, from what I understand, maybe we'll see them rebuild a new version of Stitch's Great Escape with the live action Stitch within that space, or maybe it'll be something new entirely. And I'm kind of hoping that they go in a different direction with Lilo and Stitch in that same space and have a new attraction for Lilo and Stitch within Tomorrowland, but something that we haven't seen before in terms of a ride system. I think that would be a great way of adding new life to Tomorrowland there. And then we've got the Tomorrowland Speedway, and I've been covering rumours here on this channel about the electrification of Tomorrowland Speedway for many years, as the gas-powered cars, you know, emit the fumes and the smells within the park, but also make a lot of noise. And over in Disneyland, Autopia went all electric quite a few years ago, and could we be seeing an all electric version of Tomorrowland Speedway in the future if they were to keep it the same? But personally, I think that if Disney were to give a major update to Tomorrowland Speedway, it's going to be completely removed and demolished, and something new is going to go in its spot there in terms of a new attraction altogether, or it could get some sort of IP that will make it more popular. And some years ago, there was talk of Wreck-It Ralph within Tomorrowland, within the Stitch's Great Escape location. And, you know, within Wreck-It Ralph, you've got the Sugar Rush race. Could they be doing that at Tomorrowland Speedway? Another IP which is often used within Tomorrowland is The Incredibles, and it's one to keep an eye out on, because they've got Incredibles 3 that's going to be released in theatres either in 2028 or 2029. We don't have an exact date for that by Pixar yet, but it's a very popular IP, and they have that Incredibles summer in 2018 in Tomorrowland, and so could we be seeing The Incredibles come to Tomorrowland as a natural fit for that location in the park? But clearly there's a lot to think about here, as if Carousel of Progress is going to be getting a huge update, and Space Mountain will need one in the next few years, and we've also got Tron Light Cycle Run, Disney's likely looking at the rest of Tomorrowland in a way to try and inject some new life into Tomorrowland overall and really round out that section of the park. But now it's over to you, Waltineers. I would like to know, what are your thoughts and opinions about the major update coming to Carousel of Progress, and if they were to update the other scenes, what would you like to see those updated to? And also, what would you like to see in terms of the finale scene for the attraction, and what would you showcase in that finale scene? And be sure to subscribe down below and hit the notification bell and check out the rest of the videos on this channel. And I also want to give a massive thank you to the official Waltineer Club over on Patreon for always supporting this channel. It's greatly appreciated. And also I'd like to give a massive shout out to the official Waltineer Gold members that you can see here on the screen right now, along with Waltineer Diamond members JC Russell, Justin Tupper, Tim Parsons, Noah Anderson and Clive Simmons. And with that being said for today, I've been Jack, you've been you, and I'll see you real soon.